Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. We're learning Maseches Pesachim Daf Samech, and we're starting at the Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Tes Amud Beis. This Mishnah is going to discuss whether or not a person acted with appropriate intentions during a part of the hakrava process. As we know throughout Shas, the hakrava process, when bringing a korban, there are four stages. There's shchita, the actual slaughtering itself. Shchita is defined by cutting the majority of the kana and the veshet, the windpipe and the esophagus. That is considered halachically a valid shchita. After that is the kabbalah sadam, the receiving of the blood, so shchita, kabbalah sadam. Then there's what's called hiluch, which is taking the dam and the kli in which you received from the shchita and bringing it to the appropriate place on the mizbech. And the last step is zrika. Those are the four steps of shchita, kabbalah sadam, hiluch, and zrika. These are the four steps where one does a korban. So what we're going to be discussing here, and what much of our debate is going to be, is the scope of this discussion, is what happens if a person has incorrect intentions for some part of this avoda process, or some part of the hakrava, either maybe within one of the parts of the hakrava, or in many parts of the hakrava. So that's the background, is that we have these four steps of the avodas hakorban, of shchita, kabbalah sadam, hiluch, and zrika. Let's get started with the Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Tes Amud Beis, and these terminologies will all click momentarily. Ha-Pesach, if a person is bringing the korban Pesach, sheshechato shelo lishmo, you were doing the hakrava of the korban Pesach, but you did it not lishma. You didn't do it for the sake of the Pesach. You did it for a different reason. You did it not for the sake of a Pesach, but rather just as a shlamim in general. So that's what we're talking about here. So when we say lishmo in this part of the Gemara, lishmo means for the sake of Pesach, and shelo lishmo means not for the sake of Pesach, but for the sake of shlamim. So here, ha-Pesach sheshchato shelo lishmo, your intention was not korban Pesach, just regular shlamim. And then the kibel, the halach v'zarak, the next three steps of the sacrificial process is receiving the blood in a kli, that's kabbalah and hiluch and zarak. And so you started out shelo lishmo, you ended shelo lishmo. That's bad. Your intentions weren't good at all. You weren't thinking about the korban Pesach at all. Oh, or adds the Mishnah, lishmo v'shelo lishmo. You started out with good intentions and you ended with poor intentions. You started out thinking about the korban Pesach. You ended up thinking about the fact that it should just be for a shlamim in general, but not specifically for a korban Pesach. Or the reverse, shelo lishmo v'lishmo. Or I had negative kavana first and correct kavana later. So negative kavana means it's only for a shlamim, and then I'm like, you know what, I really should do this right. Let me have intention for the korban Pesach. In all of those cases, the halacha is that the korban is pasul as it relates to the Pesachim. Okay. That's the basic din. So asks the Mishnah, 4 lines, 5 lines, 6 lines from the bottom of the page, Keitad lishmo v'shelo lishmo. What does it mean, lishmo and shelo lishmo, that we've been using in the Mishnah? I've already foreshadowed this. So says the Gemara, when we say lishmo v'shelo lishmo, when we say first you have good intentions followed by bad intentions, so says the Mishnah, l'shem Pesach u l'shem shlamim. First, you have intention for Pesach, that's lishmo, and the shelo lishmo is that you are being too general. You're not thinking about the Pesachim itself. You're thinking about the shelo lishmo, which in this case means not Pesach, but rather the shlamim in general. What about the other case? When we say shelo lishmo v'lishmo, what was your intention when you initially were lo lishmo, not for the right reasons, and later for the right reasons? And of course, in line, explains the Gemara, l'shem shlamim l'shem pesachim. First, you had kavana for a shlamim, that's shelo lishmo. And then you changed your mind and you decided to do it properly, and that is l'shem pesach. So that's what our Mishnah describes here. The first 3 lines of our Mishnah basically depict a scenario where if you had any negative kavana, either both, first or last, the halacha is that the korban Pesach is going to be pasul under the circumstances. So here's what the Gemara opens with. Bai Rav Papa, and according to some, it's actually Rava. Is it Rava? I can't remember which one. Yeah, it says Rava on the bottom. I'm not sure who the author of this was. Here was his question. We just highlighted in our Mishnah that there are 4 steps to the hakrava process. There's shchita, kabbalah sadam, hiluch, and zrika. When we say that a person had an iteration of a lack of good kavana and good kavana, or in the reverse, is that talking about within one step of the 4? Let's say only shchita or only kabbalah sadam, but by the others you had good intentions? Or were we saying no, it's only within one step, or is it even straddling various steps of the hakrava process? So that is the Gemara's question here. Asks the Gemara, Boy Rav Papa, be'avoda achas tanan o b'shtei avodos tanan. When you said in our Mishnah that the korban would be puzzle, were you saying within one of the 4 steps of the hakrava process that you change your mind? The beginning of the shchita, I thought shlamim. At the end of the shchita, I thought Pesachim. Or no, maybe, says the Gemara, o b'shtei avodos tanan. Really, in the beginning, during shchita, I was thinking shlamim. During the Kabbalas Hadam, I was thinking Pesachim. So how do we view the invalidation of our Mishnah to say that it's puzzle? Do we say that it's within only one step? Or do we say that it is also possibly within 2 steps? And be'avoda achas tanan, if in fact we do say that it's one avoda, that the psul can happen where I have in the beginning of, let's say, shchita of one of the 4 steps, I have the correct thought of Pesachim and I change my mind to shlamim, or vice versa. So if we say that, then that is Rabbi Yossi. That aligns with the shita, really unrelated to here, but aligned Rav Yossi. What does he say? Do Amar af bigmar dvar of Adam nispas. If a person says a line, he says a line that contradicts itself. So we look at the whole stream of his comments, and the end can harm the beginning. So let's say, like the example we saw the other day, is I want to bring a korban mincha from barley, which doesn't exist. So there we'd say what happened at the end is connected to what happened in the beginning. So that's what the avoda achas tanan means, is that just like Rabbi Yossi over there by the language of Nadarim and Nadavos would say that we look at both parts of your sentence and they can connect to one another. So too says the Gemara that if the first version of Rav Papa is right, that it's really saying that the psul in our Mishnah is be'avoda achas, so then that's perfectly like Rabbi Yossi. Rav Meir, because had it been like Rav Meir, this would never get off the ground. Rav Meir Amar Tafus Lashon Rishon. Whatever comes out of your mouth first, you're done. So if you start out with good intentions, you're done. You start out with bad intentions, whatever it is, they'll correlate. If you have good intentions, the result's going to be fine. So says the Gemara, if you say it's avoda achas tanan, that must be like Rabbi Yossi. If you say that the psul in our Mishnah is shtei avodos, not only within shchita, or only within Kabbalas Hadam, or only within hiluch, or only within zrika, but even expanding and straddling over more than one of the parts of the hakrava process, the Rav Meir, he would have said it would be Tafas Rosh Rishon. Or as we turn to the top of Samach Hamad Aleph, says the Gemara, O Dilma, or perhaps Bishtei Avodos Tanan. Really, the psul in our Mishnah is talking about Shtei Avodos. It's talking about a psul where my machshava was incorrect in one part of the avoda and correct in a later part of the avoda. That's possible. And the afilu, the Reb Meir, the Amar Tafas Lashon Rishon Hani Mili be'avoda achas haba b'shtei avodos moda de misal. But maybe according to Reb Meir, even according to Reb Meir, says the Gemara, afilu the Reb Meir who says that whatever comes out of your mouth first, maybe he'd say that's only true within one sentence. Maybe that would only be true by application to just shchita. But if I have a machshava in one case, which is good in the shchita, but in a later part of the hakrava, let's say by the Kabbalas Hadam, I have a different machshava, maybe there Rav Meir would acquiesce to Rabbi Yossi's shita that we string them together. Rav Meir may have only limited the connectability of the beginning and end of his sentence when they're within one avoda, but not if they are within 2. So that's what the Gemara wants to know. Maybe he would agree that even if your first kavanah was perfect, but the fact that in a later part of the hakrava process, either in steps 2, 3, or 4, the fact that you had a negative kavanah, lo lishmo, then that might be problematic. So before we answer that question, first the Gemara says, Amre, ahaya, which part of our Mishnah is Rav Papa asking about? That we explained 3 different iterations of what the psul could be. It was shelo lishmo and shelo lishmo, where both were negative, your first and second machshavos. The second one was shelo lishmo and lishmo. It was bad and then good. And then the reverse, it was lishmo and then shelo lishmo, good and then bad. So we don't know which one. So says the Gemara, let's analyze that. Amre ahaya, on which one was Rav Papa asking? So says the Gemara, inema, if you want to say it's on the machshava process, on the thinking process that went like this, shelo lishmo v'lishmo. You started out in the negative. I'm only doing shlamim, and then you changed your mind to say I'm even doing Pesachim. So you went from shelo lishmo to lishmo. So then, if that's true, bein be'avoda achas, bein b'shtei avodos, whether or not this would have happened within one avoda or two. Bein l'Rab Meir, bein l'Rab Yossi, and no matter which Tana you hold, like, doesn't make a difference. If Salah Mekamaisa, because your first kavana was negative, everyone is going to agree that it's problematic. Everyone's going to agree to that, because according to Rabbi Yossi, it's problematic because we factor everything in. And according to Rabbi Meir, it's problematic because the first words that come out of your mouth are tafus. So no matter what, it can't be that what Rav Papa is asking on is a case of shelo lishmo followed by lishmo. Rav Papa cannot be asking on a case where you started out with bad kavana only to do a shlamim and ended with good kavana to even do the korban pesach. The Hala Rabbi Yossi, says the Gemara, because even according to Rabbi Yossi, nami af bigmar dvarav adam nispasis. So no matter what, when we couple everything together, we're going to see that you'd be puzzled no matter what. So that can't be what Rav Papa is bothered by, because according to Rav Papa, according to everyone, actually, this part of the Mishnah, which starts out as shelo lishmo and followed by lishmo, everyone's going to agree that that's going to be puzzle. Bein ve'avoda achas, bein b'shtei avodos, and therefore the whole question of Rav Papa would not apply there. So therefore, says the Gemara, 7-8 lines down, says the Gemara, ela alishmo v'shelo lishmo mai. It must be that Rav Papa is asking about a case in the Mishnah where it first starts out with proper intentions. See, because there, Rav Meir would not say, oh, you're done. You had a negative kavanah, everything's over. And Rav Yossi would also not yet say you're done, because we don't know what the future holds. So there, says the Gemara, El alishmo v'shelo lishmo mai. It must be that Rav Papa's question is talking about a case where your first kavanah was good. I want to do a korban pesach. And then your brain shifts and says, no, I don't want to do a korban pesach. I just want to do a shlamim. Mai, what is the status? Namely, what was Rav Papa's question? Is this din of lishmo and shelo lishmo, when we say that it's puzzle, do we say that it's true within one part of any one part of the avoda, either shchita or kabbalas adam or zrika or hiluch, I should say, or hiluch or zrika, or do we say that it would be puzzle even if the machshavos were split over various elements of the hakrava process? So the Gemara is going to present 4 answers, which will cover the gamut of the page here, and then we'll be done with this amud. And as we move to the top of Samach Amud Beis, we'll see a new shaila that'll take us to the next Mishnah, I think. Yeah. Nope. It'll take us to a question at the first of the long lines. So let's see how the Gemara attempts to answer this question of Rav Papa. Says the Gemara, Tashma, we have a brisa. What does the brisa say? HaPesach she'shechato shelo lishmo, v'kibel v'holach v'zorach shelo lishmo. That's our Mishnah. That's our exact Mishnah right here, a quote. Says the Gemara, we have a Mishnah. Our Mishnah is going to be a potential answer. So it says, what did our Mishnah say? Let's read it and translate it literally. We'll then see the Gemara is going to put a spin on it. But what the Gemara first explains is as follows. If the Korban Pesach was shechted with bad kavana, namely that it's not being done for Korban Pesach, but it's being done for just a shlamim in general, and then v'kibel v'halach v'zorak, you did the next 3 steps of the hakrava process, collecting the blood, walking to the appropriate place on the mizbech, and doing the zrika shelo lishmo, also negative kavana. Hey chidami, what exactly is that case? Inema kidikatoni, if it's like we just said it was, lamali ad mechashev lekulhu mikamaisa if saleh. It can't be the pashut case of as we read the words in our Mishnah. That can't be, because then you're done from the moment you start, because you did shchita, you did one thing, shelo lishmo. Of course, it's going to be puzzle. So that can't be. Therefore, says the Gemara, mikamaisa if saleh, you would have been done from the first moment. Elalav. It must therefore be that pshat in our Mishnah is not what you think. What is pshat in our Mishnah? And here the Gemara gets a little creative. Here's really how we should understand our Mishnah. We're on Samach Amud Aleph, and we're about 12 lines down in the Gemara. HaPesach she'shechato shelo lishmo. That's case 1. Case 1 in our Mishnah is if you do a Korban Pesach and the Shechita, the first step of the Hakrava process was done for the sake of Shlamim instead of Pesachim. So it's bad intentions as it relates to Korban Pesach. And then adds in the Gemara, Inami, or another way to understand our Mishnah, really we're adding to our Mishnah, Shechato Lishmo, or maybe Yutaka did have good Kavana in regards to the Shechita. However, after that, it was V'kibel v'halach v'zorak shelo lishmo. That's another possibility within our Mishnah that's being added here. Inami, still a third possibility. Shechato v'kibel v'halach lishmo v'zorak shelo lishmo. Or you did the first 3 steps of the process of hakrava lishma, and just the 4th one, the zrika, was shelo lishma. Tehav yala shtei avodos. Here we see the possibility that our first case in the Mishnah is talking about machshavos that change over different avodos. So says the Gemara, if that's pshat in the reisha of our Mishnah, then I don't understand something else. 1/3 of the way down, samach amud aleph. Ema seifa, if that's true, lishmo v'shelo lishmo hechidami. What's the case of lishmo and shelo lishmo? What was that case referencing at all? So says the Gemara, hechidami inema b'shtei avodos. If you want to say that the later case in our Mishnah, which details out lishmo v'shelo lishmo, that can't be talking about shtei avodos because we just reinterpreted the first line of our Mishnah as lishmo followed by shelo lishmo. So says the Gemara, hainu reisha. You can't say that the reisha is lishmo and shelo lishmo when the latter case in the Mishnah is also listed explicitly as lishmo v'shelo lishmo. So therefore, says the Gemara, elalav, it must be be'avoda achas. It must be talking about just one avoda. The Rabbi Yossi, and really it's the sheet of Rabbi Yossi Damar apik mar dvar v'adam nispas. So says the Gemara at the end of our analysis of our Mishnah, it comes out to answer Rav Papa's question, and we're going to reject this. But the Havamina right now is that our Mishnah is a raya to Rav Papa that it's really be'avoda achas. We're only talking about a psul. Within any one of the 4 steps, your kavanah shifts from lishmo to lo lishmo, from Pesachim, the specific, to shlamim, the general. And if a person were to have such a machshava within any one track, within any one element of the avoda process, of the akrava process, so then our Mishnah indicates that in such a case it would be possible. So says the Gemara, maybe that's a right we hold like Rabbi Yossi. Answers the Gemara, lo, you're incorrect. La'olam b'shtei avodos. Really, our Mishnah is still talking about 2 avodos. The reisha, the koi b'shchita, the kamachashe b'shchita. In the beginning of our Mishnah, if you look back at our Mishnah, it says Pesach shechato shelo lishmo. That's our Mishnah. So here it says in the beginning, the reisha, the koi b'shchita, the kamachashe b'shchita. In the beginning, you were doing shchita, and you were having machshavos about shchita. Inami koi b'zrika, the kamachshav b'zrika. The reisha is talking about within one avoda. However, seifa the koi b'shchita. Seifa, the case where we go from lishmo to shelo lishmo, the koi b'shchita, that's where you're involved in the shchita right now. You're holding the shchita knife in your hand. The kachashi bizrika, but what you're thinking about is the zrika, and you're thinking about something different in the zrika. By one, it's lishmo, it's for the korban pesach. That's by the shchita. But then my brain shifts about the zrika, and now I'm saying that by the zrika, it's going to be for the general, for the shlamim, and not lav dafka for the pesachim, and therefore that should be invalid. So says the Gemara, the koi b'shchita v'kachashi b'zrika. The Omar hareini shochet es hapesach lishmo lizrog damo shelo lishmo. And what's happening is that I've bifurcated my brain into 2. I said that by the shchita I'm thinking about pesachim, and by the zrika I'm thinking about something else. The kamash malan, and what we learned from our Mishnah is that the machshavinan me'avoda la'avoda. That even though I'm only thinking about the zrika during my shchita, even though I haven't even gotten to the zrika yet, but my brain, when I'm doing shchita, that's lishmo, that's pesachim. But I'm thinking in the back of my head that in a few minutes when I do the zrika, that's going to be done l'shem shlamim shelo lishmo. Says the Gemara, v'hainu b'ayder Rav Papa, and that's why Rav Papa is so confused, because our Mishnah can be understood this way, and therefore the first answer is rejected because it's not clear as to whether it's talking about avoda achas or shtei avodos. So says the Gemara, let's try again. Let's try and answer Rav Papa's question from another source. Says the Gemara halfway down, Toshma, O shelo lishmo v'lishmo pasel. If you started out shelo lishmo, and that means you're thinking about shlamim in general and not pesachim in particular, and then you shift your brain, v'lishmo pasel, and then you decide that you're going to focus on the pesachim in particular, so the halacha is pasel. That's part of our Mishnah as well. So says the Gemara, Hechidami, what's the case? If you want to say that what we're talking about in our Mishnah, when it switches from lo lishmo to lishmo, is different parts of the hakrava, from shchita to, let's say, for example, the Kabbalah Saddam, 2 different parts of the avoda, hashta, that can't work. Hashta, if in general we're going to say, says the Gemara, just lost my spot here, sorry. Hashta, says the Gemara, lishmo v'shelo lishmo amris pasal. If when you start out with good intentions and you switch to bad intentions, that's pasal, then shelo lishmo v'lishmo mibaya. Then when you go from bad intentions to good, that's even worse. That's way worse because you started out in the negative. You started out in a way which is bad. You were thinking only about shlamim in general and not about psachim in particular. Elalav, it must therefore be ba'avoda achas. Says the Gemara, maybe it's talking about avoda achas. We'll be the seifa ba'avoda achas, and if the seifa is talking about only one part of the avoda, because it can't be talking about two, because it's not svaradik to say that it's talking about two. Therefore, reisha nami ba'avoda achas. Therefore, the reisha of the Mishnah must also be talking about one avoda. This is our second approach that's recommending an answer to Rav Papa's question to say that it must be we're talking about this psul is all of our Mishnah is only talking by one avoda within one of the four steps of the hakrava process. Good. So says the Gemara, that's also rejected. Lo olam b'shtei avodos. Really, the Mishnah is talking about two different avodas. Ubedinhu d'lo itzrichle. And really, we didn't even need an extra case to be listed in our Mishnah to speak about lishmo and shelo lishmo. The idea, the tana lishmo v'shelo lishmo. But since we taught the case of lishmo and shelo lishmo, tana nami shelo lishmo v'lishmo, we also taught the case that's obvious, which is the case of where you start out shelo lishmo. That case is pashut. Everyone agrees it's pashut. There's no chiddush in the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says shelo lishmo v'lishmo, that case is entered into our Mishnah just for poetic purposes. It's made. We've heard this idea before. I need a ton of reisha, ton of sefer. That whole principle, as mentioned in the past, is to ensure that there's a simplicity, an ease with which one can memorize things. So this makes it a little bit more balanced, a little bit more congruent and symmetrical, and therefore the Mishnah added it. But you're right, it's taka true that it doesn't need to be that way, and therefore the Mishnah could also be understood as the psul being part of shtei avodos. And if that's true, then this second marimakom does not help Rav Papa's question. Let's go to answer number 3. We're about 12 lines or so from the bottom, 4/5, 5/6 of the way down. Tashma, shechato shelo la'ochlav. Let's say that the Kohen's doing the shechita by the Korban Pesach, but his kavana is not for the people who are supposed to eat it, not for the Bnei Chabura, but stam. It wasn't thinking about the right people. V'shalolim nuyav. It wasn't for the people who are part of the Chabura. V'la'arelim, for people who are precluded because they have an orla, they have never had a bris milah. And for people who are tamei, and by definition, if you're tamei, it's kachim kalam. You're not allowed to touch kachim kalam if you're a tamei. You can't eat it for sure. So if the Kohen, when he's doing the shechita, has in mind of any one of these people, pasal. The halacha is that the shechita is considered pasal. Hacha pshita ba'avoda achas. Here, this is explicit. Here, we're only talking about the shechita. All the Kohen is thinking about is who is not going to eat this food, the arel, the tamei, whoever. And therefore, we see here that it's tamei. So it says the Gemara must be that we're talking about avoda achas. Umi the seifa be'avoda achas, reisha nami be'avoda achas. And if it's true that here, by the case of shchato shelo la'ochlav, if this case that we just quoted 4/5 of the way down is talking about avoda achas, then our Mishnah must also be talking about avoda achas. Says the Gemara, no, that's not correct. You're right that in general, when we have a number of mishnayos that are clustered together, we typically assume that they're of similar cases, but lav dafka doesn't always work out that way. Midi iriya, is that always the case? Hakedi isa. One Mishnah is talking about shtei avodos. One Mishnah can be talking about avoda achas. It's just not true what you're saying. Sefer be'avoda achas, reisha I be'avoda achas, I b'shtei avodos. It's possible to have a different understanding, and therefore answer number 3 is not a viable answer to Rav Papa's question of whether or not the psul in our Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Testament Beis is a psul that applies within one of the 4 steps, or if it straddles even a number of the 4 steps of hakrava. So let's try our 4th and final answer for this particular question. Tashma. 7 lines from the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom. We just learned la'ochlav. We didn't learn this yet, actually. La'ochlav v'shelo la'ochlav. Let's say that when a person is doing hakrava, the Kohen is doing the shechita, so he has in mind for those who will eat it and also for those who will not. So he has a double kavana. I have in mind the people who are going to be the Bnei Chabura, and I also have in mind Arelim, Tmein. So what happens in that case? It says the Gemara Kasha. Okay, that's fascinating because we just learned a moment ago that in an equivalent case where he had in mind of everyone of a negative kavana, I'm doing the shechita for the Pesachim, but no one's going to eat it because I don't have any of the right people in mind. So there we said pasal. Here we said if you have ochlav and shalol ochlav, those who will eat it and those who will not eat it. So then we said that it's kosher. So ask the Gemara, hechidami. If you want to say that the kavanos of the Kohen were split b'shtei avodos, were split over 2 different parts of the avodah, V'taima de chashiv bezrika. And the reason why it's kosher over here, where the kavana of the Kohen is for the ochla, those who will eat the korban pesach, as well as shalol ochla, the arelim and the tmeim. And the reason why is because the machshava during zrika can be problematic, but not as it relates to achila. Dein machsheves ochlen bizrika, because you can't cause problems with achila by having a bad machshava during zrika. So says the Gemara, that implies 3 lines from the bottom. Ha be'avoda achas kegon b'shchita. It implies that within any one avoda, demehanya be'machsheves ochlen, that had it been that he had a machshava, it would passel the food. That's the implication. That's the implication, is that it seems to be that la'ochlav and shelo la'ochlav, that if the Kohen were to have this double kavana when he's doing shchita, both for those who are the bnei chabura and those who are ineligible for being the bnei chabura, it's kasher. But if you say it's only because he was talking about zrika, and by zrika the machshavos of zrika don't impact achila, so then it implies that by shchita it does impact it, and it should therefore be pasal. That can't be. Last line of the page, because we have a rule, mixas ochlin lo pasla, that if you have a small number of people who are not eligible to eat the korban pesach, it doesn't ruin it. That implies even if during shechita that's true. And therefore, says the Gemara, that can't be what's going on here. Turning to the top of Daf Samach Amud Beis, Ella, says the Gemara, La ba'avoda achas. It must therefore be that this case, where the Kohen has kavana to do shechita for both those who are eligible to eat the korban pesach and those who are ineligible, they must be talking about one avoda. Umideseifa ba'avoda achas, reshanami ba'avoda achas. And maybe we could make a similar assumption that just like in the Resha, in this case of Ochlin and Lav B'nei Ochlin, where the Shochet, where the Kohen had kavanas to do a kavana for those who are B'nei Chabur and those who are not. So then says the Gemara, so maybe Resha Nami B'avoda, as says B'avoda Achas, top of Daf Samach Amud Beis, 2 lines down, answers the Gemara, Midi area, Lav Dafka. Again, usually when we see clusters of Mishnayos, they're talking about the same things, but that's not always true. Seifa be'avoda achas, v'reisha be'avoda achas, or b'shtei avodas. It's just not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true that we have a mukhrach way, a clear way to understand this brisa. Therefore, let's summarize, not in detail, but just in general. We've asked one question and given 4 difficult answers. The question we asked is, when our Mishnah says that if a person has a mixture of machshavos, either both bad in beginning and end, or one good, one bad, or one bad, one good machshava, however they play out, those 3 iterations, we said in our Mishnah that that's possible. Rav Papa or Rava wanted to know, when we say this rule that you're changing of your mind in the midst of what you're doing, is that true only within one of any of the 4 steps of the avoda, or is that true of multiple steps of the avoda? The answer remains inconclusive from the Gemara. We're now going to ask a new question. This will take us toward the bottom of the page, and then we will pause for the night. 5 lines down, Samach Amud Beis. The Gemara asks a fascinating question. Pesach, sheshchato b'shar yemos hashana lishmo v'shelo lishmo mahu. Okay. So we have said already that the word lishmo means that you have intent to bring a korban pesach. See, that's true here too. The problem is, though, it's not Yud Daled Nisan. It's Yud Nisan. It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. You want to bring a korban pesach, but your timing is off. So your lishmo of, yes, this is korban pesach, is problematic because your timing is poor. So says the Gemara, let's say that a person brings a korban pesach but brings it a few days early. So if his kavana is lishmo and shelo lishmo, he starts out thinking about the korban pesach, and he then decides to start thinking about pesachim in general. Mahu, what would the din be? Mi asi shelo lishmo. Would the shelo lishmo aspect, which means, as we've learned already, shelo lishmo here means for the shlamim, would it at least be a valid shlamim? Could the shelo lishmo, the fact that he has a kavanah that it should be shlamim, could it save the day here? Umapik le midi lishmo machshir le olo. In this case, lo lishmo sounds like a bad thing, but really the lo lishmo of this guy is shlamim, and that would make it a kosher shlamim. It would be a totally puzzle psachim. Because here's what's happening. It's Yud Nisan. It's not Yud Daled Nisan. I'm totally off on my time. And I have my animal with me. Here's my sheep. And I'm like, whatever the tefillas are, this is my psachim. This is your psachim. You're totally off kilter. And then I change my mind. No, this is my shlamim. So when I say this is my shlamim, which is referred to in the Gemara as lo lishmo, does that save the psul of thinking on Yud Nisan that this animal is taka psachim, which it isn't because it's the wrong day? Does the shelo lishmo component of my machshava, when I start thinking that this animal should be a shlamim and not a psachim, does that save the animal and keep it at least a kosher shlamim? That's the Gemara's question. So says the Gemara, this is not the first time the question was asked. Kiyasa Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi showed up, Omar, he said as follows, Amrisa l'shmaisa kamed Rav Yirmiyah. I brought up this sugya in front of the great Rav Yirmiyah, and I argued the following. Follow along. Hoel ulishmo, sorry, here we go. Hoel ulishmo machshiru bismano. If in general, not early, but on Yud Daled Nisan, if in the right time, lishmo is a machshir, having the right kavana, when I'm thinking about psachim on Yud Daled Nisan, that's perfect. And in general, v'shelo lishmo machshiro, shelo bismano. And when it's not Yud Daled, when it's actually Yud or a day earlier than Yud Daled, the shelo lishmo is thinking that it's a shlamim. That's helpful to the korban. You don't want to be thinking about psachim 5 days early. That's the wrong time. You should be thinking about shlamim. If that's true, so then Rav Dimi argued to his Rebbe, Rabbi Yirmiyah, no, maybe I should assume as follows. Ma lishmo hamachshiro bismano ein motzio midi shelo lishmo. Just like when there's a lishma mindset on bismano, on Yud Daled for Korban Pesach, it does not solve the shelo lishmo component because our Mishnah says it's pasul. So he says, if that's true, then af shelo lishmo hamachshir shelo bismano in motziyim midi lishmo upasul. Then when it's Yud Nisan and my lo lishma mindset is shlamim, which is appropriate for now because it's Yud Nisan, it does not solve my problem because I already had my pasul thought of it's Yud Nisan time to bring the Korban Pesach. You're wrong. It's not the right time to bring the Korban Pesach. So does my afterthought of maybe it should be a shlamim work? Says Rav Yirmiyah, says Rav Dimi to Rav Yirmiyah, I would assume that it doesn't solve any problems. So Amar Li, Rav Yirmiyah says back to him, says back to Rav Dimi, you're incorrect. Amar Li, lo, your svara is not a good svara. There is a deep logic to it actually, but the Gemara says that it's not on a level playing field because 1/3 of the way down Samach Amid Beis. Amar Li, lo, your answer, your comparison is not right. Im Amris b'shelo lishmo shekein noheg b'chol azvachim. We know that in general, shelo lishmo, thinking about shlamim applies to all zvachim. Tomar b'lishmo shekein eno noagel b'zvachim. But the positive mindset of psachim, that's what lishmo means in our Gemara. It's equivalent for the word psachim. When that only applies by one korban, that only applies by psachim. So they're not on a level playing field. It's only ela b'pesach bilvad. So basically, what Rav Dimi tried to do is he tried to take the shelo lishmo, the mindset of shlamim, and the mindset of psachim, and say, well, they're pretty similar. And then Rav Dimi gets rejected by Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah is like, no, they're totally not. The psachim mindset, the lishmo of psachim, is so unique it cannot be replicated because the mindset of shlamim applies to every shlamim, and therefore the Gemara, Rav Yirmiyah, rejects the opinion of Rav Dimi. Asks the Gemara 1/3 of the way down, how do we paskin? My have Allah. How do we paskin in this case? It's the 10th of Nisan. I have in mind to bring up psachim, and then I change my mind and I want to bring a shlam. So we don't have a clear answer from this because Rav Dimi wanted to make a recommendation, and we don't know. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Pesach sheshchato b'shar yamos hashana lishmo v'shelo lishmo kasher, da'astamo lishmo ka'e. He says that when a person brings the Korban Pesach throughout the year at the wrong time, and it's a mixture of lishmo and shelo lishmo, it's kasher, da'astamo lishmo ka'e. We assume that he had the appropriate mindset here. That's a very difficult line to understand, but that's what we assume. And even here, even here, when he adds in all of a sudden, shelo lishmo, you're adding in at the 11th hour that you're thinking about shlamim, kasher. Alma, what do we see? We see the following, halfway down. Asi shelo lishmo, we see that the shlamim mindset of your hakrava comes to save umapik le'midi lishmo, and it undoes your problematic thinking of this is a psachim on Yud Nisan. No, it is not a psachim on Yud Nisan. But we're willing to work with that because your later thought was better, and it undoes the damage of your initial thought. You thought that Yud Nisan is a great day to bring the korban. You're just not right. But because your brain trailed to the place and you finally decided just regular shlamim. So says the Gemara, that works. Okay, that's Rava's answer, is that this actually does work. That if you start out on Yud Nisan and you're thinking about the Korban Pesach, I'm going to be fulfilling a mitzvah d'oraisa. No, and then he's like, wait a minute, no, I'm not. I'm sorry, I got the wrong day here. I'm early, and therefore I'm going to have the mindset of shlamim. So therefore, says the Gemara, that counts. Wait a minute. Hold on one second. You're not on a level playing field, because you're trying to say that you can have the lowly shmo mindset, the mindset of shlamim, to come save you from your incorrect mindset of Pesachim and Yud Nisan. That's not true. Dilma shiny, maybe it's a different case. Hecha de amar mehecha de lo amar, when you're explicit versus when you're not explicit. After all, in the case of le'ochlav, the shalola ochlav kasher, we said on the previous amud that if the shochet during the shechita for the korban pesach has two groups of people in mind, he has people who are the bnei chabura, eligible to eat the korban pesach, and he has people who are not the bnei chabura, areilim and tmeim, they can't benefit. We said it's kasher. And we said over there that if his mindset was exclusively shalola ochlav, for the wrong group, it's puzzle. Why? We should have taken his natural mindset that it was for the right reasons, that he was doing the shechita of the korban pesach for the right people. It's different when you're explicit versus when you're not explicit, and we learned that from the case of the Kohen who was shochet for the ones who were shalola ochlav only. Hachanami, here too in our case, you cannot make the comparison, Rava. You cannot make the comparison, shiny heichad amar, mehechad lo amar, and therefore you cannot say your answer, and we would therefore reject Rava's answer. Rava wanted to say that when one started out on Yud Nisan with a mindset of Pesachim, which was incorrect, and he shifted to the mindset of Shlamim, which was correct, he wanted to say problem solved. Says the Gemara, no, that's not true. This was a case where it was not specific what his mindset was, and therefore we don't know what his mindset was. Amar Le, Rava says back to him, Midi Iria, what kind of comparison are you making? Bishlama hasam delo kama delo akar le b'shchita stame vada lishmokai. What are you talking about? If a person by a korban, if the Kohen's doing shchita, we don't assume that he is going to exclude the correct people from the shchita. That's not a natural state of assumption. Elahacha, here, he was explicit. Stame le'ochlav kai. We would assume that Dilma mimshechehani ba'asi acharinu mimnei ilave. We would normally have assumed, without him explicating that it was only for shalola achlav, we normally would have assumed his mindset was for anybody who's going to eat the korban pesach. It's not, because the Mishnah writes nimnenu moshchen es yedehen mimenu ad sheyishchat. And people, this for me, it's for me. Everyone's ponying up. I want in. And his mindset is very, very global. So therefore, Rava pushes back on the rejection, and he tries to support his answer. So we're going to stop here now. And it seems at this point that Rava's answer is embraced. And let's just review this part of the Gemara. We already reviewed the first half. We said from our Mishnah that we didn't know where the psul of the mixed mindsets of the Korban Pesach applied. Does it apply within one avoda or within two avodos? We don't know the answer to that. We tried 4 different ways. And then we asked a question on the top of this Amud about a person who's bringing their Korban Pesach on the wrong day. They're bringing it earlier than they should have. Starts out with a mindset of Pesachim, ends with a mindset of Shlamim. Does that work? Rava wants to say, yes, it works. It does work. The mindset of Shlamim comes to save the day. And that's how we conclude this Gemara. Yirtzeh Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up 6 at the first of the longest lines on Samach Hamid Beis Bayalahu. I'm not exactly sure how far I'm going to be able to get tomorrow. If I don't do the blot and a half, then I'll see how Shabbos and Motzei Shabbos goes, and we'll catch up at some point next week if we're not caught up by the end of by Sunday night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Shkoyach.
Baruch to you. Thank you.